Once upon a time, in a bright and cheerful village, filled with chirping birds and tall swaying trees, there lived a young girl named Mila. Mila was a special girl with a huge smile and twinkling eyes. She was the only daughter of the wealthiest couple in the village. Everyone knew Mila and would say, "There goes Mila, the treasure of our village." Her parents loved her dearly. They had a grand house, the biggest one in the entire village, full of rooms that echoed with laughter and love. Around their house were fields of fruits and vegetables that stretched out under the warm sun. Mila's father owned the largest shop in the village market, where people from far and wide came to buy things. Their shop sold shiny jewels that sparkled like stars and soft clothes that felt as gentle as clouds. Mila's parents gave her everything she could ever need, and her heart was always filled with joy. She went everywhere with her mother and father, to colorful markets, sparkling rivers, and visits to friends in nearby villages. Everyone loved Mila because she was kind and sweet, just like her parents. But there was one thing about Mila's house that made it special, a big secret. There was one room in their house that no one ever went into. Not even Mila. It was known as the mystery room, and it made her home feel like a castle with hidden treasures. Mila's life was like a wonderful dream. She had her loving parents, her beautiful house, and everything a little girl could ever want. But one sunny day, something very sad happened. Mila's parents had to travel across the wide river to visit friends in another village. They were going in their special canoe, which was painted with bright colors and beautiful designs. Mila didn't go with them because she was feeling a little unwell and stayed home to rest. That day, the river was rougher than usual. The waters swirled and rushed faster than anyone had expected. Mila's parents tried to steer their canoe carefully, but the river was too strong. Suddenly, with a big splash, their canoe tipped over and sank. It was a terrible accident, and Mila's mother and father didn't return. They were gone, taken up to the stars, leaving Mila all alone. When the news reached the village, everyone was heartbroken. Mila was devastated. She missed her parents more than words could describe. Her tears fell like rain, and a smile that everyone loved so much had disappeared. The villagers, who loved Mila and her parents dearly, came to her house to comfort her. They brought food, hugged her, and cried with her. To honor her parents, the village did something very special. They decided to close the market for a few days. No one bought or sold anything. Instead, they spent the days remembering all the good times they had with Mila's parents. They spoke of how kind and generous they were, and how they had made the village a happier, brighter place. During those days, the cheerful village became very quiet. The trees seemed to whisper gently in the wind, and even the birds sang softly. Everyone in the village was mourning, sharing in Mila's grief, and trying to comfort her through her great loss. The once happy little girl, whose big smile was now replaced with sadness, learned that even in the brightest places, sorrow can find its way in. But she also discovered that her village was with her, every step of the way, holding her hand as she went through this difficult time. In Mila's big, beautiful house, where love and laughter used to fill every room, there was still that one room that was different, the secret room. It had a large wooden door with a heavy lock that shimmered in the sunlight. The key to the room was hidden, and no one ever mentioned where it could be. Colorful cloths draped the walls around the door, adding to the mystery of what lay behind it. The mysterious room in Mila's house was no ordinary room. It was wrapped in shadows and whispers, and the older servants, who had been there since Mila was just a baby, knew a secret about it. They knew that the room held something so powerful, it could scare the stars from the sky. Long before Mila was born, there had been curious servants who wanted to know what was behind the door. They would try to listen through the keyhole or peek under the door. But those who got too curious disappeared. One day they were there, and the next day they were gone. No one knew where they went, and over time, people stopped talking about them. The other servants warned each other, "Don't go near that room, or you might vanish, just like the wind at the end of the day." So they only cleaned around the door, never touching it, and quickly walked past with their heads down. Mila, of course, knew about the room. Her parents had told her, "That's a special room, my dear, we must never go inside, it's for the best." Mila loved and trusted her parents, so she never asked why. She would nod and go about her day, her heart beating a little faster whenever she passed the mysterious door. The room stayed locked, silent and secretive, as the big house buzzed with life around it. It was like a quiet shadow in a sea of sunshine, always there, always waiting. After the sad loss of her parents, Mila needed help to take care of her large home. One sunny morning, she decided to find new helpers. That's when she met the twins, Sami and Lano, the only twins in the village. They were known for being kind, hardworking, and well-liked by everyone because they always smiled and spoke kindly. Sami was as bright as the morning sun, always ready to help or share a laugh. Her brother, Lano, was cheerful but quieter, always thinking and observing to learn things quickly. They were inseparable and took care of each other just as well as they took care of everything else. Mila liked them right away. She saw how neat their work was and how polite they were to everyone. "You two will be perfect for my home," she told them, smiling hopefully, trying to bring some warmth back to her quiet, lonely house. The twins were thrilled to help Mila. They moved into the servants' quarters and began their new jobs the very next day. They swept the floors, polished the furniture, and made sure everything was in order. Sami loved to sing while she worked, and her voice was so sweet that even the birds stopped to listen. Lano, on the other hand, was great at fixing things. No broken gate or leaky roof lasted long with him around. As they worked, they respected all the house rules, especially the one about the mysterious room. They had heard the whispers from the other servants. "That's the room no one goes into." They nodded in agreement, fully understanding the seriousness of the rule. With Sami and Lano in the house, Mila felt a little lighter. Their cheerful presence brought new joy to her home, and their loyalty was clear. They cared deeply for Mila and the house. It seemed that with them there, the dark corners of the big house were a little less shadowy, and the silence wasn't as heavy. Life in Mila's house began to find a new rhythm, with the twins' laughter and chatter filling the air. But the mystery of the forbidden room still lingered, a quiet question that hung in the air, waiting to be answered. As the second anniversary of Mila's parents' passing approached, the whole house became busy preparing for the remembrance ceremony. It was an important event in the village, and everyone wanted everything to be perfect in honor of her parents' memory. Sami and Lano were fully involved in the preparations, making sure everything ran smoothly as the day drew near. The twins, Sami and Lano, were especially busy cleaning every corner of Mila's house, making sure it sparkled in preparation for the remembrance ceremony. As they cleaned from room to room, dusting and arranging, there was one door they hadn't touched, the door to the secret room. Sami, always curious, noticed that the door stayed tightly shut, its lock shiny and untouched. One day, as they were cleaning, Sami turned to her brother and whispered, "Have you ever wondered what's inside that room? We've cleaned everywhere else, but we've never even opened that door." Lano looked at the door, his eyes full of both curiosity and caution. "Yes, I've thought about it," he replied, "but remember what the others said. That room is forbidden for everyone, even us. We shouldn't think too much about it." But Sami couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that day, she found a moment to speak with Mila. "Miss Mila," Sami began gently, "there's one room we haven't cleaned. With so many people coming for the ceremony, shouldn't we clean it too?" Mila, who was arranging flowers, paused and looked toward the secret room. Her face became serious, and her voice was firm. "No, Sami, that room is fine. It doesn't need to be cleaned. I need you and Lano to promise me you'll never worry about that room. It must stay closed." Sami nodded, a bit disappointed but respectful of Mila's wishes. "Yes, Miss Mila," she replied. But the mystery of the room still tugged at her heart. Why was it so important to keep it closed? What was inside that made it so special? That evening, Sami and Lano talked about it in hushed tones. "Maybe it's full of treasure," Sami guessed, letting her imagination run wild. "Or maybe it's a secret place where old stories are kept," Lano added, just as fascinated by mysteries as his sister. Despite their growing curiosity, They both agreed to follow Mila's instructions. They stayed away from the room and focused on their work, preparing for the upcoming ceremony. But the question of what lay behind that locked door wouldn't leave them alone. It was like a riddle, always there, hidden just out of reach, softly calling to them in the quiet moments. As the day of the remembrance ceremony approached, the village became busier. People from nearby villages, and even some from far away, started arriving. Their voices and footsteps filled the air with excitement and respect. Mila's home became the center of attention, with guests admiring its beauty and all the preparations that had been made. Sami and Lana worked tirelessly, making sure every guest felt welcome and that everything in the house was perfect. However, the presence of so many visitors, and all the talk about memories and secrets, only made the mystery of the secret room even more tempting. The room seemed to whisper to them, even as the house buzzed with activity. One quiet evening, after a long day of preparations, Sami and Lano sat together in the kitchen. The house was calm for a moment, and the twins began to talk. "Everyone is talking about memories and secrets," Sami said, her eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and wonder. "And we have a room full of secrets right here, and we don't know anything about it." Lano nodded, his curiosity growing again. "It's strange, isn't it, to have a part of the house that even we aren't allowed to see, what could be so important or dangerous that it has to stay locked away." The twins exchanged a glance, and without saying a word, they both knew what the other was thinking. The mystery was too much to ignore. They decided they had to find out what was inside the secret room. "But we have to be careful," Leno said, his cautious side taking over. "We can't just walk in, we need a plan. Something to make sure we don't end up like those who disappeared." Sami agreed, and together they began to devise a plan to uncover the secret behind the locked door. Sami and Lano had come up with a simple but clever plan. One of them would go into the secret room first, while the other stayed outside to keep watch. The one who went inside would take a quick look around, and then come back to share what they saw. They hoped this way they could satisfy their curiosity without both of them getting into trouble at the same time. "We'll do it early in the morning," Sami suggested. "That's when everyone else is still asleep and others are busy with their chores." Lano agreed. "And we'll be quick about it. If anything feels wrong, we'll come right back out. No staying inside too long." With their plan in place, Sami and Lano felt both excited and nervous. They knew they were breaking the rules, but their curiosity was too strong to resist. That night they went to bed with their secret plan in mind, dreaming of what they might find behind the locked door. The mysterious room waited for them, quiet and still, holding its secrets for the morning. The next morning came, and it was still a bit dark outside. Sami and Lano woke up early, their hearts pounding with both excitement and fear. They quietly got out of bed, making sure not to make any noise that could wake the other servants or guests. As they walked softly toward the secret room, the air around them seemed cooler, and the hallway felt longer than usual. When they reached the door, it looked bigger and older than ever. Sami touched the door, and it felt cold. Lano stood guard while Sami took a deep breath and slowly turned the handle. To their surprise, the lock clicked open easily, as if it had been waiting for them all this time. Sami pushed the door open with her foot and stepped inside, her heart racing. But as soon as Sami crossed the doorway, the light from the hallway seemed to vanish. Darkness swallowed everything, and she couldn't see a thing. She blinked, trying to adjust her eyes, but it didn't help. "Lano, it's too dark, I can't see anything," she called out, her voice filled with worry. Outside, Lano strained to hear Sami's voice, but suddenly, everything around him became quiet. It was as if he had been plunged underwater. He couldn't hear Sami, the birds, or anything at all. Scared for his sister, Lano decided to step into the room to help her. As soon as he crossed the same threshold, he realized something strange. He could still see the room, but he couldn't hear a single sound. It was like someone had turned off all the noise in the world. Inside, he saw the room was bare, except for an old chest in the center. But when he tried to speak or hear his own footsteps, there was nothing. Sami, still trapped in total darkness, called out, "Lano, can you see me?" Her voice echoed strangely in the dark, but Lano couldn't hear her. Desperate, Lano moved closer to where he thought Sami might be, stretching out his hands. He finally saw her outline, her hands waving around blindly. He reached out and touched her arm, but even then, when he tried to speak, no sound came out. Sami, panicking in her dark world, was scared. Lano, unable to hear, was equally frightened. They stood there, unable to fully communicate or understand what was happening to them. The room had trapped them in two different ways, one in total darkness, the other in complete silence. Lano took Sami's hand and led her back to the door, hoping that if they left the room, everything would go back to normal. But as they stepped toward the doorway, the door slammed shut with a loud, heavy thud. They were trapped inside the room. Sami's blindness and Lano's deafness remained, their senses cut off from each other. They were now isolated in their own separate experiences of the room's strange power. Sami, who could still speak, shouted as loudly as she could, while Lano, who could still see, banged on the door, hoping someone outside would hear them. But no sound escaped the room. The secret of the forbidden room had caught them, and it was far more dangerous and powerful than they had ever imagined. Now they were trapped inside, with no one to help them, and no way to break free from the room's sinister grip. Sami's voice and Lano's attempts to push the door didn't make any sound. It was as if the room existed in another world entirely. Meanwhile, outside, the village was waking up to the excitement of the remembrance ceremony. Mila, busy with the last-minute preparations, hadn't noticed Sami and Lano's absence at first. But as the hours passed, and the twins were nowhere to be seen, her worry grew. They were always reliable, always on time. This was very unusual for them. "We haven't seen Sami or Lano this morning," one of the servants whispered to her, a look of concern on his face. Mila felt a sinking feeling in her chest. The twins had never missed a day of work, especially not on such an important occasion. Quickly, Mila organized a search. "Check everywhere," she instructed, her voice tight with worry. "Look in the gardens, the storerooms, every room in the house, find them." The servants scattered, calling out the twins' names as they searched through the house and grounds, but there was no answer. The servants checked all the usual places, the kitchen, the garden, the path to the market, but found no trace of Sami and Lano. As the sun rose higher, worry turned into panic. Mila's mind raced, trying to think of where they could have gone. By the time the guests began arriving for the ceremony, the entire household was in a state of disarray. Mila decided to keep the disappearance a secret from the guests. She didn't want to worry the village leaders or the twins' parents. But as the day turned into evening and still no sign of the twins was found, her worry turned into fear. She knew that Sami and Lano wouldn't just leave without telling her, especially not on such an important day. Something was terribly wrong. "I've looked everywhere, Miss Mila," the head servant reported, his face lined with concern. "They're nowhere in the house or on the grounds." Mila's thoughts drifted to the one place she dreaded, the secret room. Had they? Could they? She pushed the thought away, too afraid to consider what it might mean. "Maybe they went to the village for something," a young servant suggested, trying to offer a simple explanation. But Mila shook her head. "They would have told me," she said quietly, her eyes slowly turning toward the house, toward the door that no one was supposed to open. The search went on through the night, with lanterns flickering as the servants and a few guests continued looking. But as the night deepened, hope began to fade. Mila stood by her window, watching the search parties, feeling a cold fear settle deep inside her. Her home, always filled with secrets, now seemed more mysterious and dangerous than ever. She feared that Sami and Lano had stumbled upon something they weren't meant to discover. The house felt different that night, heavier, as if it too missed the twins. Mila felt more alone than ever, surrounded by shadows, whispers, and a secret she didn't fully understand. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the house shifted from worry to a tense, uneasy silence. Every morning brought no news of Sami and Lano, and every night felt darker and more oppressive. The lively spirit that once filled the house had disappeared along with them. Then something strange and terrible began to happen. At first it was subtle, a faint, unpleasant smell that seemed to drift through the hallways. Mila thought it might be some spoiled food or an issue with the waste bins. But as the hours passed, the smell grew stronger, becoming impossible to ignore. It was the unmistakable scent of decay. Mila's heart sank as the odor spread through the house, reaching every room. It became so overpowering that the servants could no longer ignore it. They whispered among themselves, their faces pale with fear. "What is that awful smell?" they muttered, covering their noses. The house was now filled with the stench of something dreadful, and deep down, Mila feared the worst. The secret of the forbidden room seemed to be revealing itself, and whatever lay behind that door was far worse than they had ever imagined. The servants moved through the house, covering their noses with cloth as they worked, trying to avoid the awful smell. The once warm and happy house now felt like a dark cave filled with dread and fear. Mila wandered through her home, pale and worried, her mind racing. The horrible scent seemed to be coming from the very walls, creeping into every corner of the house and filling it with a heavy sense of doom. By the evening of the third day, the smell had become unbearable. The servants barely spoke to one another, their faces filled with fear. They knew that such a smell could only mean one terrible thing, but no one dared say it out loud. That night, Mila lay in her bed, the stench filling her room and making her feel sick. Sleep was impossible, her mind filled with dark thoughts of what could be causing such a terrible odor. The image of the secret room flashed in her mind, the door still shut, hiding whatever was inside. Could it be? Her heart raced at the thought. The next morning, unable to bear the situation any longer, Mila called her most trusted servant. "This can't go on," she said firmly, try to hide her fear. "We need to find out where the smell is coming from, it's unbearable." As the day went on, the tension in the house grew worse. The terrible smell hung over the house like a dark cloud, and the servants moved about with dread, each of them secretly wondering if they too would disappear like Sami and Lano. As the sun set, there was still no answer. The house was not only dark but filled with a heavy fear of the unknown. The servants whispered among themselves, speaking of curses, ghosts, and revenge from beyond the grave. Mila felt the weight of her family's hidden past pressing down on her. The secrets of her home, once kept in the shadows, were now becoming a burden too heavy for her to carry alone. At dawn, the head servant, overwhelmed by the awful smell and fearing for everyone's safety, made a decision that would change everything. Quietly he left the house and walked through the still sleeping village to seek advice from the elders. It was not a decision he made lightly. Involving the elders meant bringing the village into the personal matters of Mila's family, something she had always tried to avoid. The elders gathered in the village meeting hut, a place where important decisions were made. The head servant, his face full of worry, told them about the strange disappearance of Sami and Lano, the unbearable smell, and the fear that had taken over Mila's home. The elders listened closely, their faces serious. They knew the history of Mila's family and the whispers of dark secrets that had always surrounded the house. After quietly discussing the situation among themselves, the elders decided it was time to act. The safety of the entire village could be in danger. Led by the head elder, a small group made their way to Mila's house. Mila was surprised by their sudden arrival, but she understood the seriousness of the situation. The head elder, speaking in a calm but firm voice, said, "Mila, you are a cherished member of our village, and your well-being, as well as that of your household, concerns us all. We must search the house thoroughly to find the source of this trouble." Mila, feeling the weight of her family's secrets pressing down on her, nodded in silent agreement. Together with the elders, the servants resumed their search of the house. This time they moved with a sense of purpose, guided by the presence of the elders. They searched every room, one by one, until only one room remained, the secret room. Mila stood in front of the door, her heart racing. The head elder noticed her hesitation and gently asked, "What is behind this door, Mila?" Mila swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. It is a place of old family secrets. Even I do not know what lies inside. My parents forbade anyone from entering." With a nod of understanding, the head elder stepped forward, ready to uncover whatever lay behind the door. Before the elder could touch the door, Mila cried out, "No, please don't open it. It's a family secret, and I don't know what's inside." Her words hung in the air, but it was too late. The elder had already turned the handle, and the lock clicked open, as if it had been waiting for that moment. The door swung wide, and the group was immediately hit by the overwhelming stench. They stepped inside the room, peering into the dim space. There, lying on the floor, were the lifeless bodies of Sami and Lano. Their faces were peaceful but pale. A wave of sorrow swept over everyone in the room, and gasps and murmurs filled the air as the terrible truth was revealed. The village elders turned to Mila, their expressions full of sadness and concern. It was clear that something dark and mysterious had claimed the lives of the twins. Tears streamed down Mila's face as she shook her head, her worst fears now confirmed. This discovery changed everything. The village came together to mourn the loss of Sami and Lano, and to comfort Mila in her grief. The secrets of the room were no longer hidden, and the shadows that had haunted the house began to lift, replaced by the light of truth and the kindness of the community. However, the grief of the village soon turned to anger. By the next morning, whispers were spreading quickly, growing into a cloud of suspicion that hovered over Mila. People gathered in the village square, questioning how something so terrible could have happened right under Mila's roof. She must have known, some said, while others accused her of using the twins in a dark ritual to maintain her family's wealth. Rumors of mysterious practices passed down through her family's history. Despite Mila's pleas of innocence, the villagers' fear and anger could not be calmed. Mila stood in the middle of the square, surrounded by her once friendly neighbors, who now looked at her with eyes filled with judgment and fear. The village elders, feeling the pressure of the crowd's growing fury, were forced to act. "We must ensure this tragedy never happens again," the head elder declared solemnly. "Mila, you are accused of harboring dark secrets that led to the death of Sami and Lano. What do you have to say for yourself?" Mila, overwhelmed by the hostile faces surrounding her, struggled to speak. "I knew nothing of the darkness in that room," she cried, her voice trembling. "I only followed my parents' wishes to keep it closed. I am innocent." But her words fell on deaf ears. The villagers, blinded by grief and driven by fear, needed someone to blame. They decided Mila was guilty, and for the safety of the village, she had to be punished. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the square, the elders made their final decision. Mila was tied to a wooden post at the edge of the village, her cries for mercy and understanding ignored. The air was filled with the sharp sound of flint striking steel, and soon, the flames began to rise around her. Tears streamed down Mila's face as the fire took hold. But in her last moments, her sadness turned to anger. "I curse this village," she shouted over the roar of the flames. "Just as you have falsely accused me, may you all one day face the same accusations and feel the same helplessness and rage." As the flames consumed Mila, the villagers watched in a mix of horror and regret. A cold wind swept through the square, as if nature itself mourned the injustice being done. That night, the village did not celebrate justice. Instead, it grieved a loss deeper than they could truly understand. Mila's curse, whether born of real power, or simply the bitterness of a wrongful death, lingered in the hearts of all who were there. Slowly, the crowd dispersed, each person carrying the weight of the tragedy back to their homes. The memory of Mila's final anguished cries, and the heat of the fire, would haunt the village for generations. Years passed, and the sad story of Mila became something the villagers only whispered about. The spot where she had died was left untouched, a burnt patch of ground that no one wanted to disturb. The village looked the same on the outside, but the atmosphere had changed. People carried a sense of guilt and often remembered Mila's last, angry words. Then, something happened that brought Mila's curse back to everyone's minds. A distant village accused them of stealing a valuable ancient crown. Though the villagers protested their innocence, and there was no real evidence, the accusation stuck. People started avoiding the village, and even old friends treated them suspiciously. The village leaders had to travel to meet with a powerful chief who asked them tough questions, just like they had once questioned Mila. They tried their best to prove they were innocent, but no one believed them, just like how no one had believed Mila. In the end, the chief banned anyone from visiting the village for 10 years. The villagers had to grow their own food, make their own clothes, and live without contact with the outside world. It felt like being trapped in an open prison. As time went on, the villagers began to understand how unfair they had been to Mila. They realized they had let fear and anger guide their actions, leading to a terrible mistake. The older villagers, now gray-haired, would gather and reflect on what had happened. "We can't let fear and anger make our decisions," they would say. "We must remember Mila and learn from our mistakes. We need to seek the truth carefully and treat everyone fairly." After many years, the real thieves were caught trying to sell the stolen crown, and the village was cleared of blame. Everyone felt relieved, but they also remembered the painful lessons from the past. They worked hard to rebuild their friendships and restore trust, but they were more cautious this time. In the center of the village, they placed a small stone in memory of Mila, surrounded by wildflowers. The stone bore the words, "In memory of Mila, whose story teaches us to be careful with the truth and not to rush to judgment." This story holds lessons for everyone. For parents, it teaches the importance of being mindful of the choices you make, especially those that could affect your children. Like Mila, they may have to deal with consequences they don't understand. For workers, it's a reminder to follow the rules you're given, just as Sami and Lano should have done with the forbidden room. Disobeying rules can lead to serious trouble, as it did for them. For communities, it's a lesson in how easy it is to let fear and anger drive our decisions, often leading to mistakes and unfair treatment of others. Like what happened to Mila, rushing to judgment can cause harm to the innocent. We should take time to listen to all sides of a story and truly understand the situation before acting. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more tales like this one. Goodbye.